I'm CK. Tonight I'm going to build a bass drum module from ProK. I haven't done a drum synth in years, and it wasn't Eurorack at that time anyway, so this will be interesting. It's from thonk.co.uk, where I get most of my modules, and we'll see how it goes together. Hope you enjoy the video. Here's what you get with this kit. You get the bass package, which will be for snare, bass drum, hi-hat, and I forget what the CP is. They have 4 drum modules, so this is the one that's the bag that contains the parts that are common to all of them. Here's the IC for the bass drum, and the PCB for the bass drum, and the front panel for the bass drum. So very well packaged. I'm sure ProK has a lot of benefit to doing a generic and then leveraging that. I have not built one of these before, so I don't know if I'm going to go on and get the snare, hi-hat, and the other module. I might. And right now, I think a couple of retailers have like 10% if you buy all 4, or 10% off if you buy all 4. Let's see. Some resistors and power supply, some LEDs, put these all in the right place, backboard, so that's the componentry that goes on the rear board, and we'll open that up when we get to it. I think this is well, obviously it's a tap switch, but I don't know exactly what it's for. I'm not going to speculate. Some resistors, some more resistors, some more resistors, and unfortunately Thonk packed these in individual plastic bags. As you know, I'm not a big fan of that. That's a waste of plastic. Some hardware for the front panel. Couple of pots, knobs, couple of jacks, couple of more jacks, another knob or potentiometer, and a pin header to connect to things together. There's a build document QR code, and again, this is the brains behind everything. It's not just an IC, it's a mini, it's a teensy 3.2 board. I think I've done a teensy, I've done one other unit with a teensy in it. It'll come to me and I'll mention it. Let's look at the PCBs now. Get my scissors out because this is put together very tightly. I don't want to damage anything. And as usual, I can't get the stupid bag open, so I just cut it open. And we've got this, which I will admit, I have no clue what that is. So the boards look good. I'm not a big fan of white board material, but that's just personal preference. It doesn't affect the quality. The holes are all through plated. All the components have their values listed, so you could put it excuse me, so you could put it together without a build guide. But we will check the build guide anyway. And then in here is the front panel. Pretty simple. So if we look at the PCB itself, these are 4 jacks, This is that button thingy that we saw in here. This is the, that's interesting. So this little jumper set is what I'm going to call it until I actually learn what it is. Goes through there. So this may be, it may actually be samples. You may be able to put samples in there for it to read. Again, I'm completely making that up right now. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about at this point, but I'm just guessing. Then time pot and a channel pot, and then some LEDs go in here. Looks like an interesting build. The backboard I'll put in a different tray. Eurorack cable, bunch of transistors and caps. Oh no, there's no transistors, there's electrolytic caps. I'm sorry, I glanced at it too quickly. Something, oh, that's a surface mount voltage regulator, I believe. So we will do some surface mount soldering on this kit. More resistors. Whole bunch of pin headers, couple of sockets. These are what I call, I don't like these sockets. These are the round, not rectangular ones. I don't find them to be as reliable as rectangular sockets, but that's just personal preference. So that's all the bits in the bags. Looks like a rather comprehensive kit, and we'll open the build guide, get the soldering iron heated up, and get this thing put together. I've got the build guide up, and it's very detailed. In other words, it's step by step by step, individual resistor by individual resistor step, which is great, and it's got lots of pictures, and as you know, I think pictures are so critical nowadays when you're designing kits. So what they want us to do first is the resistors and the diodes, and as you know, I have no real commentary on resistors and diodes because they're pretty much straightforward. So we're going to zoom through that. So going into fast motion playback right now. Resistors and diodes are on. Now we're going to put the SMD voltage regulator on, and they walk you through putting the surface mount component on very well. I think they describe it, how to do it very well. They use techniques that are very similar to what I use, as you can see in some of my other electronics kit videos. Fortunately, voltage regulators are pretty big. They're not like, I did a speaker kit the other day that had like 200, I'm sorry, that's too much. It had 96 surface mount LEDs, which are the size of grains of rice, and that was a little tedious. But this one's going to be pretty straightforward. What we're going to do is we're going to heat up some solder and put it on that pad. Then we're going to grab a pair of pair of tweezers, and pick up the voltage regulator. Get it over here and get it aligned with the pads we're going to use, and then heat up that blob of solder we had there and get the top in there, let it cool. Ta-da! It's on. And you don't have to fight with it. Now, like with any voltage regulator or transistor, the best way to do this is to do the middle leg first, then do the outer two. It definitely reduces your risk of bridging contacts. So that's that. Probably about the most straightforward surface mount component to solder that you ever will find. Okay, now we're going to do the IC sockets. We've got 2 of them. We're going to make sure the notches are in the right place. And the way I like to solder components like sockets and pin headers is like this. I'm going to do one leg, let it cool, pick it up, take a look, make sure it's all flat and flush, and that one is, so I don't have to do any adjustments. If I did have to adjust it, all I do is press on it hard with my index finger and heat that one solder leg, and it would sink back into the right place. It'll probably be more. Now we're going to do the pin headers, the pre-cut ones. One for power, of course. And they're going to go, oops, and a nice picture to show you that they go on the opposite side from the sockets, so like that. And this is labeled as your typical eurorack power cable connection. This one is labeled expand, so obviously there's some expansion capabilities available for this, and so on. Now I'll take a look at it, and it seems to be okay. It's flat to the board and perpendicular, so I don't have to make any adjustments. And I'll go ahead and solder these connections. Now we're going to do the 100 nanofarad caps. Okay, now we're going to do teensy. The teensy board is right here. So we're going to take the teensy board out of here. There's my scissors. And the first thing we need to do is we need to go to zoom in here. Again, they've got good pictures, but may as well see it live too. Right here, here's the USB connector, and right here between these two pads there is a small trace electrical connection, and we're going to cut this. So we're going to, and I'm going to get my head in the shot, we're going to use an X-Acto knife and just cut that trace, even though it didn't feel like it cut there. I've got plastic coming up, so we should be good. Now, to verify that I have cut that trace and there is no connection between those two pads, I'm going to get my meter. First, I'm going to untangle my meter leads, which I always do. set it to beepy. So when there's conductivity, it beeps. So let's make sure that it doesn't beep when I touch these two pads. And it does not. So I have severed the electrical connection between those two pads. Back up again. And we're gonna put all the pin headers on to make this a going concern. So that's interesting. We're going to do these two holes, these 13, and all 14 of these, but we are going to leave 1, 2, 3, 4 pins unput together, unconnected. It's just interesting. So we want 2, and then 13. Gonna double check that count, and I counted wrong because I got 14, which is good because I can use this for the other side. Well, let me double check that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Huh. What do you know about that? So that will go on that side. Fortunately, cutting something a little longer is better than cutting it too short. Now, that's what we want. Make sure I got that right, and I did. So I'm going to put the two long ones on first because they provide a stable platform, or will provide a stable platform when I do the short 2-pin one. So again, we're going to do 1 pin, and now we're going to look, and this one's not quite perpendicular, so I'm going to push on it with my fingers, heat that pin again, and get it perpendicular. The other one appears to be fine. Now I'm going to put the 2-pin in just because I can. Right now. There's a little press fit interference between the 13-pin and the 2-pin. Okay, more than a little interference. Okay, I'm going to have to back off on that and finish the 13-pin side, because it looks like I may have to do a little X-Acto knife shaving of things. Now, one thing when you're doing this, as you'll notice, right above where my soldering tip is, there are a couple of surface mount caps, and now I'm soldering very, very close to the pins on the bass drum programmed chip. So you want to be really careful not to heat up those already installed components and not to accidentally bleed any solder over on them. There just is not much space. So, I mean, you can do it, obviously. You can see that it's not too difficult, but it's just something to be very wary of. Whenever you're hand soldering around surface mount components, you need to be cautious. Part of the reason why you need to be cautious is you might not be able to tell that you did something, because just heating a component and then banging it with the soldering iron or even the solder could dislodge it off its existing solder pad and you wouldn't know it. Same with bridging. If you accidentally get a little solder splash over these very fine legs, you might not know that you bridged it, and then later on when you try and power up, things won't work, obviously. See, that one's really close, and the next one's really close too. These right along the surface mount chip are really, you got to be really careful. In fact, if I were to do this again, I would probably take some flux paste and rub it along those already existing surface mount connections to try and protect them from any solder bleeding over to them. I didn't cause that this time, fortunately, but I can certainly see it happening. Okay, now I'm going to look at this 2-pin header and see what we've got going on. See, it's kind of splaying out because because this pin header right here still has some plastic on it that I could have trimmed closer, and I didn't because I normally don't need to. So I'm trimming it up now. And now it'll go perpendicular, pretty much. Let me see. Yeah. Now we're going to do the same thing with the female pin headers, because we're going to put them on there. It's going to be a little bit more of a pain. One thing about female pin headers that I always feel somewhat bad about, and I have to go get another pair of pliers to do this. You always sacrifice one pin on the female ones. Now I want to make sure this goes, I'm doing it the right way, because we've got that one pin going in, so we want to make sure that we're laying this out correctly, and we are. The USB connector goes here. It says USB this end. So I'm going to come over here and just sacrifice this pin. Ta-da! And that's good. Get the other one. That's good, and ditto on what we're going to do with this one is we're going to put those two large side ones in, then we'll do the 2-pin one. Okay, let's align these. See, that's really misaligned, but doesn't matter. Just heat that pin up, and now it's all straight. To solder this one in, I'm going to take a rubber band and hold it against the other rail. This rubber band happened to come off a eurorack power cable, so you probably have one lying around. I'll just keep it from being at an angle while I solder it in. So, oh, by the way, they don't do what I just did. They recommend that you put the teensy board together and then solder the female pins. In other words, push the male pins into the female receptacles and then solder the female pins. That works too. I don't particularly like to do that. Never have. So we're going to get the teensy mounted, And be careful because this is a live button. You don't want to push down too hard on it. So that's all good. Now we're going to take the two other chips and put them on the board. Now we're going to move on to the front PCB. We'll be working with these other female headers later on when we get to the point where we're going to be joining the boards. Alright, where were we? Things might look a little different because during the day today I had to build up a new Bafako output module. They're out for a rack I'm building with a Moog Mother 32 in it. So I had to get this one out of the way while I did that. I didn't film that because I've already recorded that, and that video, building a Bafako out, is in my channel playlist. I might put it in the description, but probably not. Now we're switching over to the front board, and we're going to do the resistors. There are quite a few of them. So we are going to go into fast replay again. So enjoy watching the resistors going on the board really fast. So there's all the resistors for this board. Okay, we're going to do two bat diodes. These are the blue and black ones, like so. And we've got 100 nanofarad cap. Only one cap on the board, which is really unusual. And it's, oh, I'm sorry, it's actually not that unusual in this case, since the teeny board, which is where a lot of the cap activity is going to be for the chip, it's already got the cap surface mounted on there. So we just have to put the one on the control board. Now we're going to do the switch. Where did I put it? And it's got to be oriented a particular way. It's got a flat side, and the pins are set up a particular way. So flat side goes to flat side, like so. Now we'll just kind of put it down here on the table. Actually, I was using my pound of ice earlier today, so I may as well use it a little more. I'm not a huge fan of it, but since I had it out for something else, may as well. Now, like with the other things, put it in there. It's not quite flush, so I'm going to hold it firmly but with my finger, reheat that solder joint, and she settles very nicely down onto the board. And we can solder the rest of the pins. So that's the little switch. Seems to be working fine. So he wants me to put the jacks on before the pin headers. That's interesting. That's a different way to do it. It's neither better nor worse in this case, since the pin headers all go along the edge. So it's not as if they're amidst all the other componentry. Now we'll do the pots. I think the pots are both the same. Yeah, they're both 50K. So I don't have to worry about which one is which and getting it wrong potentially. And of course, whenever I do that, the jacks jump out when I have a little impact on the board. So we've got 4 LEDs that go in here, and apparently we're going to do that at the very end, which is fine, again. Okay, we'll get this all oriented, see how it looks, see if the button works good. Button works good. I'm gonna put one of these panel nuts back on. Now the author of the kit suggests putting masking tape or something on the SD card and the button, because the button's not supposed to be soldered yet, and the button to make sure they don't slip out of position when you turn it over to solder the pins. But I'll just hold it with my middle finger while I solder the two support pins. Then we don't have to worry about it. Alright, now I'm going to solder all these jacks and pot pins, so we'll go back into fast motion. Okay, now we can take the panel back off because we've got two more things to do. We've got the pin headers and the LEDs. So first we're going to do the pin headers, one 11 pins and one 7 pins. There's those header pins all in place. So this board, oh, I missed 2 pins on the freaking jacks. That's why you do what I was just about to do, which is go over all the solder points on the board and make sure they're all soldered and they're all soldered well, because you catch things like that. Okay, those are all good. We're just left with the LEDs. Now we're going to do the female headers, which go on the board that has the ITZY, or teeny, whatever the heck it is. Now, I think we cut these yesterday. To me, yesterday. To you, it's whatever. So the pin headers go on this side. Just figure the teeny board is hanging off the back into space. And also, it's opposite the power, because the connector is going to be on this side. So I'm going to set this down like I did the other one, like I did the male headers. Now we'll prep for the LEDs. These are big, chunky LEDs, big square ones. Kind of neat. Let me take a look at how bright they are. Oops. Oh, they're pretty bright. Not overpowering. And we are going to be careful not to solder these yet, and we want to make sure the polarity is correct, of course. And we're going to put the panel back on again and put one of the pot nuts on. You know, I think I could probably put it all on. Yeah, he does say we're at the point where you can put it all on, because once we get the LEDs seated and soldered, we're not taking this front panel off anymore. Okay, now we'll shove the LEDs forward. Now he recommends that they go flush, and we can use some masking tape to put across the front of the panel, and this is 7-day painter's tape, whatever you want to call it, so it won't leave a residue and it'll come off really easily. So we'll put the LEDs up against it, snug them down, tap on them to make sure that they're flush and even with each other. Put this back in the pan of ice. Now with one leg of each soldered, I'm going to take the masking tape off and make sure they are even with each other. Yeah. So I'll go ahead and solder the other legs. Now we put the board, we mate the two boards, making sure the pin header, all the pin header pins line up. Shove them all together, like so. Now we'll get our power cord. Make sure we get the red stripe where it says red on the negative end. Positive end does not have a stripe. Now I'm going to put the knobs on the pots, and these knobs, fortunately for me, have a square side, a flat side, so I don't have to try and align the index marks myself, which I'm always really bad at. And there it is. That's the ProK bass drum module. That's the front, the side, the back. Again, that's the expansion port, so nothing goes in there right now. Other side, top, and bottom. Now, we'll put it in the rack and hear what it sounds like. Right. Now we're set up in the rack. It's in the center. We're going to be using, I'm zoomed out a little bit, let me zoom out a little more. We're going to be using the Midi Thing from Bufaco to trigger this initially, and that's going in directly to the rising slope trigger here. The output is going into Patching Panda Copycat, and then that output is going into the pile amp, and the secondary repeat of the signal is going over to the oscilloscope. So I have not turned this on yet, so this is our smoke check. Let's see what blows up. Nothing blew up. That's good. Of course, part of the reason why nothing blew up is because I didn't plug the silly power connector for the bass drum unit in. So why don't I do that? That will be more effective than anything else as we test this. There we go. Spinny spin goes into that quadrant. These are different quadrants for drums. We'll go into that in a little bit. And I've got the scope warming up. While the scope warms up, I'll zoom back in on just the bass drum mod. Scope is hot and recording, even though it's zeroed out a little. So let's see if we get any sound out of this thing. So we are getting sound. Let me turn the amp up a little bit more. Let's change quadrants. Oh, I'm sorry, my scope is triggering way too slow. So that's the way that quadrant sounds. Try another one. Now we'll go up on the y-axis. Back with the X to that one. So these are These two feel like they're short attacks. Well, these are longer attacks. So that's interesting with MIDI triggering it, but let's go over to the Division 6 sequencer and play it a little bit. Stop it for a second, and I'm going to do something else here. I'm going to put the CV from the notes on the sequencer into the X input and see if that's interesting. I may not have the right voltages going to it, so it might not do anything at all. So it does do something. You can hear it, and again, this was not much voltage difference, so it wasn't a real good test of inputting mod voltages, but I think it sounds pretty neat. I'm still not quite sure what this button does besides trigger it. Let me go look at the user manual again. Oh, okay. So the button is simply a retrigger. So it'll help you when you're tweaking. When you get where you want to be, and it will, if you hold it, it will switch quads. Wow, that sounds pretty good. Listen to that. Okay, I'm going to see how fast this can respond. I'm going to turn the sequencer speed way up. Well, that's interesting. It blends, so it sounds like it's one continuous, almost a drone at maximum speed. However, it sounds pretty good. Let's see how it slows down when we start getting distinct notes again. So that's it. Pretty good little bass drum unit. Obviously, by maneuvering the X and Y to different patches, these lights correspond to quadrants with patches in them. And you can create custom patches if you want and put them in this SD slot. You can also save patches, which is very nice. I probably won't do that because I'm too lazy. But I encourage you to if you get this. So this sounds good enough that I think I will get their other modules. Now, I don't know if I will record them and put them up on YouTube, because they're basically all the same except for a different programmed card on the teeny board, and the front panels might be slightly different, but I'm not certain of that, so I may not do that. I may just do a conglomeration of all four in a demo mode when I get them together, if I choose to do that. Hope you enjoyed the video.